Well, good day to you. My name is Marti Mongiello, and I'm a doctoral student at the John F. Kennedy School of Psychology and Social Sciences at National University. And my doctor is Dr. Matthew G. Lebrasseur. Uh, this is a presentation for leadership and management, one of the classes. I'm in my second year studying for my doctoral, and I was asked to focus on this presentation for people studying for their bachelor's. And so this is all about General Bernardo de Galvez, Don Bernardo de Galvez y Madrid. Don is a celebratory word like sir, um, royalty, you're knighted. Don Bernardo de Galvez y Madrid of Madrid, General del Ejército Español. He's the general of the Spanish army, Ejército, the army, Español, the Spanish army. And this was all about how not to be a horrible boss and engage in the negative side of leadership, his winning techniques in the fleets of the Gulf, and campaigns with battles that are won across the American South. And I do not claim to be a Spanish expert. Uh, I am not. I'm still studying Spanish and with my wife. So this in Spanish would be como no ser un jefe horrible y evitar el lado negativo del liderazgo. Sus técnicas exitosas. I like this word. I just learned this word, exitosas. This means to be successful, success. Sus técnicas exitosas en las flotas del Golfo y en las campanas con batallas granadas en el sur de Estados Unidos, in the south of the United States of America, sur de Estados Unidos. Bernardo Galvez offers a master class for you students out there in how not to be a terrible boss. Long before anybody coined the phrase toxic leadership, as a Spanish general during the American Revolutionary era, Galvez commanded fleets in the Gulf of Mexico and led daring campaigns across the American South, in fact, 4 states, and secured decisive victories at Baton Rouge, Natchez, Mobile, and Pensacola. So his legacy is not simply about winning battles, it's about how those victories were achieved. And Galvez rejected fear-based command, rigid hierarchy, and ego-driven decision-making. Instead, he led from the front and shared risk with his troops. He trusted local allies and local people and empowered subordinates to act decisively. His leadership blended strategic brilliance with human awareness, which was an antidote to the destructive leadership behaviors that often fracture morale and sabotage outcomes. So by examining Galvez's campaigns and command style, we can uncover timeless lessons 250 years later on avoiding the dark side of leadership and building loyalty, resilience, and success under pressure. And his example proves that authority earned through respect outlasts authority imposed by fear and wins more than just wars. I have the background here with my agenda today, and this is going to be on General Bernardo de Gálvez, his leadership qualities displayed. I will define the differences between a leader and a manager for you and describe what is meant by the negative side of leadership, destructive leadership, and abusive supervision. I'm going to showcase how to determine the how and why horrible bosses are successful and give direct examples so that I'm not ambiguous or talking in the ether. I want to delineate the characteristics of some of these examples and people. So that would be like their personalities and behaviors of horrible bosses, and then detail situational factors leading to the rise of horrible bosses. And I'll recommend some solutions for enhancing the leadership skills of horrible bosses, specifically to my examples and points, point for point. This will also wrap up with victories against the British in the Gulf and Deep South, and the impact of Galvez's campaigns on the American Revolution. And I felt like this was quite illuminating, given this project to me by Dr. Lebrasseur. to actually take it in this direction and make it very interesting and make it applicable for projects that we're working on right now in the American Revolutionary War Living History Center and the United States Presidential Service Center. So, yeah, let's take a look at that. I have here just a quote. Leadership is the ability to influence people toward a shared goal by earning trust, setting direction, and taking responsibility, and especially when the outcome might be uncertain. A little bit about his early life and learning the differences between a leader and a manager. So he was born in 1746 and went to the military academy in Avia and fought in many different countries. And down at the bottom right here, I have an explanation of management is the practice of organizing people, resources, and processes to execute plans efficiently, maintain order, and deliver consistent results. So on the previous slide, I mentioned, what leadership is, and now I am mentioning what management is. If you're watching this, please feel free to go back and just go back and forth 2 or 3 times to take a look at it. But Bernardo de Gálvez, he entered soldiering as soon as he could essentially carry a sword. His formal training, as I mentioned, at the military academy in Avia, launched into his teens. When he was 16, he was already seeing combat action in the 7 Years' War. And in New Spain, which is modern-day Mexico and the American Southwest, he gained firsthand knowledge of frontier warfare, leading operations against initially Apache groups along the Rio Grande, and later service in northern Africa, where he was injured, and during Spain's Algiers campaign of 1775, further elevated his rank and broadened his strategic experience. So between deployments, Galvez returned to Avia, and he became an instructor and sharpened his leadership skills by teaching other people. So by the late 1770s, he had transitioned from soldier to statesman, and now he found himself as the governor of Louisiana. And there his pragmatic governance with management skills strengthened trade, encouraged settlement, and stabilized the colony. And by forging political and social alliances locally, he secured the trust and loyalty of Louisiana's diverse population. And this background grounded him in the strategic and leadership skills required for complex military campaigns, so that by 1776 he had become a colonel and married a local lady of a powerful French Creole family. His sympathies lie with the Patriots' causes as they signed the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence in North Carolina as early as 1775, and Spain secretly supplied the rebels. Don't forget, that's what we were. He was a positive governor of Louisiana and avoided the negative side of leadership destruction and abusive supervision. Stated items that I mentioned I was specifically going to talk about. And I have a couple of them listed here. I'll let you read them for yourself. But, governing people through coercion, favoritism, or intimidation obviously fuels resistance, corruption, and social unrest. And there's plenty of those to look up and see in Louisiana or any state's history. Hallmarks of destructive leadership. Abusive supervision emerges, of course, when officials rely on punishment rather than trust to manage any city or state's diverse population. As I was reading this and studying this, I was starting to think about what happened here in North Carolina with the regulators and why so many people were angry here. And at the bottom there, I'll let you enjoy that, but he's using diplomacy, building infrastructure, and a defensive strategy. And I have my references always. I'm not going to belabor those. Those are well listed on each slide as well as at the end. But in 1777, Galvez was appointed governor of Spanish Louisiana, a strategically vital territory bordering all the British-held lands and the Mississippi River. And so this is Spain, in our war. His governance combined civil administration with military preparedness, and he quickly fortified defenses while building local alliances. So underneath his leadership, Louisiana became a crucial base for operations against the British, facilitating Spanish support for the American Revolutionary cause. And his appointment marked a turning point for Spanish engagement in North America during the war. Now, it would not be till 1779 that they actually ally themselves with the French against the British. They never signed an agreement with us to ally themselves with us against the British and come into the war, but they came into the war through this mechanism and signed an ally agreement with France against the English and started to destroy the British. And you're going to see that the negative side of leadership emerges when power is used in ways that harm people, ethics, and organizational culture rather than support growth and trust. I know you see this every day of the week. Destructive leadership refers to sustained patterns of behavior that undermine employee well-being, normalize unethical conduct, and cause long-term damage to morale and performance. Abusive supervision is the most direct expression of this harm, involving ongoing hostile verbal and nonverbal behavior such as humiliation, intimidation, or ridicule toward subordinates. And together, these forms of negative leadership create environments driven by fear instead of respect, leading to disengagement, turnover, and lasting organizational damage. So Spain's role in Galvez. Covert aid and appointment. Spain enters the war formally, like I mentioned, 1779. The Gulf campaign has many breakthroughs and successes, and these strategic gains and leverage help support the United States independence. So Galvez operated as an essential agent of the Spanish Crown's policy to weaken British power in North America without entering into a formal alliance with the American colonies. They wanted to avoid that because it was very problematic to come completely out and say, we hate you and we're declaring war against you. And, this was a huge problem for Spain. As governor of Louisiana, he covertly facilitated the flow of arms, supplies, and funds to Patriot forces while advancing Spain's own strategic interests. When Spain formally did declare war on Britain in 1779, Galvez immediately shifted from indirect support to decisive military action. And this is where you're going to see him launch coordinated land and naval campaigns across the Gulf Coast like a maniac in Deep South. And his victories at Baton Rouge, Natchez, Mobile, and Pensacola, Florida, across 4 states, not only severed critical British supply lines, but also culminated in the destruction and capture of much of the British fleet operating in the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, he ended up sweeping the entire fleet from the Gulf. And these losses crippled British naval power in the region and forced a strategic reallocation of resources away from the Atlantic theater. In doing so, Galvez secured Spanish territories, expanded imperial influence, and indirectly strengthened the American struggle for independence through the elimination of a major British military threat. So Galvez, with his strategic connections that led all the way up into the north with George Rogers Clark, was pretty smart. And you're going to see here with the map that I created, all of these are all my own first ever creations and designs that I worked on for quite a while regarding his strategic vision, his adaptability, and coordination. And I'm not going to read those things for you there. That's for you to enjoy, and the map as well. Because it is pretty cool to look at how he is going to clear the entire Mississippi. And Galvez demonstrated exceptional strategic foresight by identifying British vulnerabilities and striking where imperial defenses were weakest along the Mississippi River and the Gulf Coast. And after destroying the British forts and the naval assets on the Mississippi, he effectively opened a secure supply corridor linking the Ohio River all the way down to New Orleans. And with the British gone, there was nothing they could do about it. So this allowed materiel, intelligence, and manpower, including fighters. People have often asked me with this Hispanic army, were there people, free blacks who fought with him? Yes, there were. Were there people that came from up north, from Virginia and the Kentucky? Yes, there were. And of course, the Kentucky, it means just out west during this period. The state does not exist yet, okay? But these included fighters from Virginia and Kentucky associated with George Rogers Clark to flow south in support of coordinated operations. And even you'll see Native Americans join him and fight with him, and Hispanics from all over the Caribbean come in. It's just amazing to see this Hispanic general and his command. So Galvez integrated these northern forces with Spanish regulars, militia, artillery, and naval units, and executed combined land and sea attacks characteristic only of actually advanced 18th century warfare. By synchronizing river control, naval dominance, and ground assaults, he disrupted British supply networks, unified regional resistance, and sustained operational momentum across a vast theater of what in America would be 4 states of combat and warfare, transforming geography itself into a strategic weapon. So how horrible bosses are successful, and their characteristics and how they rise. And so this is who he is up against, okay? What do? They dominate through fear or authority, not collaboration, which is what General Galvez did. They prioritize personal ego, gain, reputation, and power over group welfare. And I'm going to throw in a little thing here. When he was actually in Mexico City, he used his own money as the Viceroy of Mexico, his own money, to buy food for quite a long time to feed people that were hungry. Now, again, some more of the horrible characteristics that General Galvez did not engage in. Exploit weaknesses in rules, bureaucracy, or organizational politics. You young students out there thinking about these things, when you're going to become a manager and a leader, look at item number 4. Disrupt norms, shake things up, and get results despite or because of being abrasive. So, none of this is nice. And as a direct example, I promised King George III, the boss who never had to apply for the job, he just arrived. And if you want to enter the wrecking ball with him is Lord George Germain during this period. He's in charge of the Americas, so if George III was the insulated CEO, Lord Germain was the toxic, chief operations officer running day-to-day operations. And he was far more actively destructive. So he's actually the perfect historical, horrible boss in this situation of the American Revolutionary War in the South that I decided to illuminate my project with. And he failed upward and loved the patronage system. So the rise of horrible bosses is rarely accidental. It's almost always structural. In the case of King George III, power was inherited, not earned, I mentioned. Birthright insulated him from accountability, allowing fear-based authority, pride, and escalation to replace adaptability. When failure carries no personal cost, doubling down becomes easier than course correction. And don't forget, he invaded this country a second time. The War of 1812, they were still upset, still angry, okay? More damaging, however, was Lord George Germain, whose ascent illustrates patronage politics at work. Court-martialed after Minden and declared unfit for command, Germain should have vanished from power. Instead, loyalty, connections, and ideological alignment propelled him upward. The system rewarded allegiance over competence, silenced dissent, and allowed a disgraced figure to re-enter authority, this time with catastrophic consequences across Earth history. this human. This pattern is not confined to the 18th century. Modern organizations still reproduce it through nepotism, informal patronage, and weak governance, especially where no nepotism clause conveniently doesn't exist. So how often, ask yourself, have you seen underqualified leaders protected, recycled, or promoted because they know the right people? When systems favor loyalty over truth, horrible bosses don't just survive, they actually thrive. And we'll take a look at Galvez's swift campaigns. I like to say 1, 2, 3, 4, who you want to root for. Baton Rouge, 1779, as soon as they declare war against England. Natchez, Mobile, Alabama. Fort Charlotte, now called Fort Condé. And a tremendous, crippling territorial impact where he destroys everything that the British has in the Deep South. It destroys their armies on the battlefield, destroys their fleets on the water, and lights them on fire. So the swift campaigns of Bernardo de Gálvez across the southeast were a masterclass in speed, sequencing, and strategic disruption. Beginning with Baton Rouge in September 1779, Galvez moved decisively up the Mississippi, collapsing British positions before they could reinforce or coordinate. And each victory was not an endpoint but a lever, and Natchez followed. And this tightened Spanish control of inland routes and severed British logistics tied to the Gulf Coast. As we move into early 1780, Galvez turned east. His campaign against Fort Charlotte, which was modern-day Mobile, Alabama, was deliberately timed and efficiently executed. So rather than overextending himself, he applied focused pressure, combining naval movement, artillery placement, and disciplined siege tactics. And the fall of Fort Charlotte in March of 1780 was swift and decisive. And this opened Spain's Gulf Coast flank and eliminated a critical British stronghold. This was not brute force warfare, it was operational intelligence, and Galvez understood momentum. Each rapid gain destabilized British command, stretched their defenses thin, and made the next victory easier. Mobile was proof that speed, clarity of command, and regional understanding could dismantle an empire one calculated strike at a time. And you can see his victories one after the other here across 4 states. The recommended solutions for enhancing the leadership skills of horrible bosses, I just want to bring up directly. I love direct examples, the siege and victory at Pensacola, and no support from his colleagues. So the siege in 1781 stands as a powerful leadership case study because it reveals both extraordinary courage and the failure patterns of horrible bosses. So when Bernardo was serving as both governor and general, laid out the necessity of a joint land and sea assault, several of the Spanish naval captains and commanders refused to enter the harbor and complained about danger and uncertainty. And rather than supporting decisive leadership, they deferred, clustered together, and chose self-preservation over mission success. A behavior, I might add, that is still common in organizations today. Galvez responded with courage, declaring, "Yo solo." He took, I go alone. He took 4 small vessels and sailed into Pensacola Bay alone, fully exposed to enemy fire and fully accountable for the outcome. A healthy leader would have joined him immediately, because this is where you're going to be faced with this guy's going to go do it. He's got, thousands of people with him. He's going to go do this, and, are we going to sit here and let him, die with all these men are going to die with him? How much longer are we going to sit out here in the bay and refuse to help him? So I say a healthy leader would have joined him immediately. A horrible boss does the opposite. They watch from safety, they allow others to risk everything, and wait to see whether success is guaranteed. Okay, so you can go out and swing yourself from a rope. And the recommended solution for improving the leadership skills of horrible bosses is clear. Do not abandon courageous colleagues. Do not gang up. Do not withhold support or test bravery from the sidelines. Okay? Leadership demands moral courage and standing beside decisive people when failure is still possible, not stepping in afterward to share the credit. And that's what they did. The second day, they saw that he had been victorious in attacking Pensacola and landing his troops. And so then they sailed in all the ships and said, okay, we're gonna join them, and our pride is damaged slightly and we look rather foolish, okay, but he's obviously done it, okay? There's, first of all, the problem in the beginning that I mentioned, and then secondarily, to sit there and watch people, you know, at some point you have to say to yourself, I guess they're just going to go anyway, so we might as well jump in and join them. But no, they decided to let him swing alone on a rope all day long. And it wasn't until the second day that they actually went in and joined them. And that's not good. His legacy and United States recognition. The strengths, of course, have been Galvez's significant contributions to American independence. And the cities of Galvez, Louisiana, Galveston, Texas, and Galveston Bay are well known by everybody. And I might add here, it doesn't say it, but President Obama announced during his tenure the full United States citizenship was granted to Bernardo de Gálvez. And this was a historic occasion with day and signature of all of that. And Bernardo de Gálvez's legacy of Hispanic soldiers and their families forces, I believe, a more honest understanding of how the United States was created and by whom. We are not dealing with immigration leadership in situations just lately in America when it comes to Hispanics. They fought and died in warfare in the Revolutionary War to help win our country 250 years ago. His campaigns across the Deep South dismantled British power in 4 future American states and culminated in the destruction of the British fleet in the Gulf, cutting off Britain's Southern war effort at its knees. And these victories were decisive Hispanic combat actions by military veterans fighting to create the new country. Yet Galvez's story also speaks powerfully to the present. Hispanic soldiers, settlers, financiers, and leaders were not outsiders to the American Revolution. They were architects of its success. The relative obscurity of this history has shaped how Hispanic contributions are perceived today, often minimizing a role that was foundational rather than supplemental. And recognizing Galvez restores historical balance and affirms that Hispanic leadership, sacrifice, and strategy helped secure American independence. His life stands as evidence that the United States was forged through multinational cooperation and shared purpose, and that acknowledging this truth strengthens both historical understanding and contemporary civic respect. The enduring legacy of Galvez. These are my references, and thank you so much for joining me today. I wish you much success in your studies. Whether you're an armchair historian or working on your bachelor's degree, I appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me. And please feel free to contact me at any time. I would love to see what you're working on.